Emma pulled her coat tighter as she hurried down the wet Chicago sidewalk. The city was restless that evening. Cars honked. Streetlights reflected on the rain-slicked pavement, and the wind carried the smell of fresh bread from a corner bakery. She had worked late again, the office lights dimming as the janitors began their nightly routine. Most of her colleagues had already left hours earlier, but Emma had stayed to finish reports her boss needed for an important meeting. She wasn't surprised when she found Daniel Hayes, her boss, still at his desk too. He was always the last one to leave. Daniel was known in the office as disciplined, calm, and almost untouchable. He had built his company from the ground up, and he carried himself with a quiet authority that made everyone pay attention. Yet tonight, when Emma saw him loosen his tie and rub his temples, he seemed less like the powerful man everyone admired and more like someone who was just very, very tired. When they finally left the building together, Daniel noticed the rain coming down harder. Without a word, he raised his hand and called a taxi. Emma expected him to wave goodbye once it arrived, but instead, he opened the door and gestured for her to get in. "Come on, Kemma," he said, his voice softer than usual. "It's late. You shouldn't be out here waiting for a ride alone." For a moment, she hesitated. Sharing a taxi with her boss felt unusual, but the rain was coming down in sheets, and she didn't have an umbrella. So she nodded and slid into the back seat. Daniel followed, shutting the door behind them. The taxi smelled faintly of coffee and vinyl, the kind of smell that belonged to countless rides across the city. Emma sat near the window, watching droplets race each other down the glass, while Daniel settled beside her. The driver asked for the address, and Daniel gave his own first. Then Emma quietly added hers. As the taxi pulled away, silence filled the small space. The hum of the engine and the rhythm of the rain against the roof became the only sounds. Normally, Emma was comfortable with silence, but this one felt heavy, charged with something she couldn't name. She sneaked a glance at Daniel. His shoulders leaned against the seat, his gaze fixed outside, as though the lights of the city held answers he couldn't find anywhere else. Emma wondered what he was thinking. He was her boss. But over the years she had caught glimpses of the man behind the professional front. A smile that softened his eyes when he congratulated someone. A deep laugh that slipped out during rare moments of humor. She respected him, admired him, but she also kept her distance. The line between boss and employee was one she had promised herself never to cross. Yet, sitting next to him now, the line felt thinner. The world outside blurred into streaks of light and water, and inside the taxi, there was only the closeness of two people who spent years orbiting around each other, without ever colliding. Daniel leaned back, exhaling slowly. His jacket was unbuttoned, his tie slightly loosened. It was the first time Emma noticed how human he looked, how much weight he carried that nobody else saw. He had always seemed so strong, so steady. But tonight he seemed like someone fighting invisible battles. Emma shifted slightly, unsure of what to say. She opened her mouth, ready to comment on the weather, the late hours. Anything to break the silence, but before she could, Daniel turned his head. His eyes met hers, and for a second, Emma felt like the air between them stopped moving. "Emma," he said softly, his voice almost drowned by the sound of the rain. She blinked, surprised by the way he spoke her name. It wasn't the firm tone of a boss addressing his employee. It was gentler, more personal. "Yes?" she asked, her voice careful. Daniel hesitated. His gaze dropped for a moment, as if he was choosing his words carefully. Then he leaned just slightly closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "There's something I should have told you a long time ago." Emma's breath caught. The words were simple, but the way he said them sent her heart racing. What could he possibly mean? Her mind spun through possibilities. Was it about work? A new project? A decision about her future at the company? Or was it something else entirely? Something she wasn't prepared to hear? Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag as she tried to steady her thoughts. She wanted to ask, to press him to explain, but she couldn't. Not yet. The weight of his voice lingered in the air, and it felt like one wrong move could shatter something fragile between them. The taxi rolled through the city streets, neon signs and traffic lights painting colors across the windows. Inside, Emma sat frozen, her heart echoing louder than the rain. She realized this was no ordinary taxi ride. This night, this moment, was about to change something she thought was unshakable. And though she didn't yet know what Daniel meant, she could feel it in her bones. Whatever he was about to say would not leave her world the same. Emma stared at Daniel. Her boss, her mentor, the man she respected more than anyone in her career. His words, "There's something I should have told you a long time ago," hung in the air like a secret waiting to break free. The hum of the taxi engine seemed distant. The sound of the rain outside faded. For a few seconds, the world shrank down to the space between them. She tried to steady her breathing, tried to act as if this was just another late night after work. But her body betrayed her. Her heart pounded, her hands felt restless, and her thoughts raced. She told herself it had to be about work. Maybe he wanted to talk about a promotion, a new position, or some career advice. That would make sense. That would be safe. But then Daniel spoke again. And every safe thought Emma clung to fell apart. "I can't keep pretending anymore," he whispered, his eyes holding hers. "Every day, every late night, every project we've worked on together, it hasn't been just about the job for me. Not for a long time." Emma froze. The words didn't sound real, but the sincerity in his voice made them impossible to deny. Her mind screamed that this was impossible. He was her boss, a man who carried responsibility, a man who had never once crossed the professional line. Yet here he was, confessing something that shattered the walls she had carefully built. Her lips parted. But no words came out. She wanted to say it was inappropriate, wanted to remind him of who they were. But her heart beat faster at his confession. She couldn't hide it. The taxi driver adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of their silence, but quickly turned it away. He must have sensed the tension. Outside, traffic lights flickered red, green, and yellow, painting colors across their faces. Inside, Emma felt her life shifting. Finally, she managed a whisper of her own. "Daniel, you can't say things like that." Her voice shook, and she knew it wasn't convincing. She sounded less like someone putting up boundaries and more like someone trying to protect herself from the truth she didn't want to admit. Daniel's shoulders tensed, but his eyes didn't waver. "I know I shouldn't. Believe me, I've told myself 1,000 times to keep quiet. I thought I could bury it. But tonight, sitting here beside you, I can't hold it back anymore." Emma swallowed hard, pressing her hand against her bag as if holding on to something solid would keep her steady. She wanted to tell him to stop, to remind him of the risks. She thought about the company, her future, the people who looked up to him. But behind all of that was another voice inside her, a quiet, unshakable voice that asked, "Haven't you felt it too?" Because the truth was, she had. She just never allowed herself to say it, even in her thoughts. The way her chest tightened when he walked into a room. The way her day felt brighter when he acknowledged her. The way his encouragement mattered more than anyone else's. It wasn't just admiration. And now that he had spoken, she couldn't deny it anymore. "Daniel," she whispered again, softer this time. He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice until it was barely above the sound of the rain. "I don't expect anything. I don't want to make your life complicated. I just couldn't go another day pretending that what I feel doesn't exist." Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to be strong, to end this conversation before it grew dangerous. But her eyes betrayed her. They lingered on his face, searching the truth in his expression. What she found there wasn't power or authority. It was vulnerability. A man who had carried so much suddenly opening himself to risk, to rejection, to her. Her breath hitched, and she looked away back at the city rushing past the taxi window. Neon lights blurred with the rain, and the world outside looked almost unreal. Inside the car, her reality had already changed. "Daniel," she said slowly, choosing each word with care. "You've always been someone I look up to. Someone I never thought." She stopped herself. Her heart wanted to say more, but her mind pulled the brakes. He studied her, silent now, waiting. Emma shook her head gently. "This isn't something we should talk about." The words left her lips, but they didn't feel honest. She knew it. And judging by the faint, knowing sadness in Daniel's eyes, he knew it too. The car hit a patch of uneven road, jolting them both slightly. For a brief moment, his hand brushed against hers where they rested on the seat between them. Neither of them moved. The touch was fleeting, accidental. Yet it sent a spark through Emma that she couldn't ignore. She pulled her hand back quickly, her chest rising and falling with unsteady breaths. She felt like she was balancing on the edge of something dangerous, something that could change everything she knew about herself. Her career and him. Silence returned, heavier than before. Emma wanted to ask him why now? Why tonight? Why in a taxi on a rainy street? But deep down, she already knew. Feelings like this could only stay buried for so long. At some point they had to come out, no matter the setting. Her heart warred with her mind. She thought of the consequences, the whispers at the office, the risks to her hard work. Yet she also thought of what it meant to have someone like Daniel see her not as an employee, not as a colleague, but as someone who mattered in a deeper, personal way. The driver slowed at a red light, and the pause felt like a mirror of their situation stopped in the middle of a journey, waiting for permission to move forward. Emma glanced at Daniel again, and this time she noticed something she had never allowed herself to see before. His gaze wasn't commanding or demanding. It was simply hopeful. Her chest tightened. She wanted to give him an answer, to say something that would ease the weight between them. But no words came. The light turned green, and the taxi rolled forward again. The city moved, the rain fell. But Emma felt as if her world had frozen in place. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment, trying to calm her racing heart. Daniel turned his gaze back to the window. But she could feel his presence beside her, like a constant pull. The ride continued, but nothing felt the same. Emma knew they had crossed a line that couldn't be erased, even if no one else ever knew, even if nothing more happened. Tonight would always remain in her memory the night. Her boss's whisper shook her beliefs and forced her to face feelings she had long buried. The taxi moved steadily through the city streets, its headlights cutting across the rain-slick pavement. Emma sat with her hands clenched in her lap, trying to keep herself calm, but her mind was a storm. Daniel's words still echoed inside her. Every day, every late night, it hasn't been just about the job for me. Her boss. The man who led the company with quiet confidence. The man she admired from the moment she walked into his office years ago. Now, sitting beside him in the back of a taxi. He had stripped away the professional mask and shown her something raw. Something personal. Emma pressed her lips together, staring at the city rushing past the window. Her heart was louder than the rain, louder than the hum of traffic. She thought of everything she had worked for, every promotion she had earned, every reputation she had built. She had fought hard to be seen for her talent, not for anything else. If people knew about this moment, they would never look at her the same again. Yet, underneath the fear, there was another truth, one she had been avoiding for a long time. She felt it every time Daniel walked into a room, every time his voice cut through a meeting, every time he noticed her efforts when no one else did. It wasn't just respect. It wasn't just admiration. It was something she had buried deep because it was easier to deny. Daniel's voice broke the silence. Softer than before, almost hesitant. Emma, I know what this looks like. I know how complicated it is. But I need you to understand this isn't something I planned. It just happened. Emma turned her head sharply, her chest tightening. You can't say that like it's nothing, Daniel. Do you realize what this could mean? For me, for you, for everything we've worked on. He nodded slowly, his expression serious. I've thought about that every single day. That's why I stayed quiet. That's why I tried to bury it. But tonight, sitting here, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. His honesty cut through her defenses. He wasn't pressuring her. He wasn't asking for anything. He was simply telling the truth. And that made it harder for her, not easier. The taxi slowed at another red light. The glow of the signal filled the car, washing Daniel's face in soft red. He looked at her not as her boss, not as the powerful man who commanded boardrooms, but as someone who was waiting. Waiting for an answer, waiting for her to either accept or walk away. Emma's hands trembled in her lap. She wanted to tell him she didn't feel the same, that this was wrong, that they should forget it. But the words wouldn't come. Her silence betrayed her, because deep down she knew she did feel the same. She had just never allowed herself to admit it. "Emma," Daniel said quietly, his tone almost pleading now. "I don't want to make things harder for you. If this is something you can't accept, I'll never bring it up again. But if there's even a part of you that feels the same, then at least let this moment be honest." Her chest ached. He wasn't demanding. He wasn't careless. He was giving her a choice. And that scared her even more. Emma turned back to the window, her reflection staring back at her in the rain-streaked glass. She saw her own uncertainty written in her eyes. She thought of her colleagues, of whispers in the hallway, of everything she had built with her own effort. Was she ready to risk it all? But then she remembered the late nights when Daniel stayed behind with her. Not because he had to, but because he didn't want her to be the last one in the office. She remembered the way he always noticed when she was overwhelmed, the way he trusted her with responsibilities others weren't given. None of it had ever been said out loud, but now, in this taxi, she finally saw it for what it was. Her heart whispered the truth. Her mind didn't want to hear. She had always cared for him, too. Emma pressed her hand to her forehead, trying to breathe. "This isn't fair," she muttered. Daniel's brow furrowed. "What isn't fair? That you get to say it. That you get to put it out there. And now I'm the one who has to decide if we go back to normal or if everything changes." His voice dropped lower. "I know, and I'm sorry. If I could keep it to myself forever, I would. But I couldn't anymore." The car moved forward again, weaving through the glowing streets. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence wasn't empty, it was heavy, filled with words unsaid. Feelings denied for too long. Emma's heart pulled her one way, her mind another. She thought of all the reasons to walk away, to protect herself, to protect him. But she also thought of what it meant to finally be honest, to stop hiding behind professionalism and admit the truth her heart had been carrying for years. She glanced at him again, catching him watching her with quiet intensity. He wasn't pushing, wasn't forcing her to speak. He was simply waiting, giving her space. That patience, that respect, was what made the decision harder. Emma wanted to reach for him. She wanted to bridge the space between them, to let him know she wasn't alone in this. But her hand stayed frozen in her lap. The taxi turned down a quieter street, the city noise fading slightly. Emma felt the weight of time pressing down on her. Soon the ride would end. Soon she would have to make a choice. Her heart whispered one truth. Her mind shouted another. She was caught in the battle between them. And there was no easy answer. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, the sound of the rain filling her ears. She wished the ride would last longer, wished she had more time to think, more time to hold on to this moment before it shattered. When she opened her eyes again, Daniel was still watching her. His expression wasn't demanding, wasn't impatient. It was hopeful and vulnerable. Emma's chest tightened. She had never seen him like this. And she knew then, no matter what decision she made, nothing between them would ever go back to the way it was. The taxi slowed as it turned onto Emma's street. The glowing city lights began to fade, replaced by quieter buildings and rain-washed sidewalks. Emma's stomach tightened. The ride was ending, but the moment between them wasn't. Daniel's. Confession still lingered in the air, thick and impossible to ignore. She could feel his eyes on her, though she kept her gaze fixed on the blurred shapes outside the window. Her thoughts raced. She didn't know what to say, what to do, how to carry this into tomorrow. The driver cleared his throat. "Which building, miss?" Emma snapped back to reality. She leaned forward quickly, pointing to the entrance with the green awning. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "Right there, please." The car slowed to a stop. The engine hummed softly, and for a moment, none of them moved. The rain drummed on the roof, the sound filling the silence Daniel had left after his confession. Emma reached for the handle but paused. She could feel her hand shaking. She couldn't leave like this, but she also couldn't find the words to fix it. Daniel's voice came low and careful. "Emma." She turned slightly, her heart pounding. "I meant what I said," he whispered. His voice wasn't commanding, wasn't confident like it usually was in the office. It was hesitant, vulnerable, almost fragile. "But I'll never force you to answer. Not tonight. Not ever. You don't owe me anything." The words struck her harder than she expected. It wasn't a demand. It was a release. Yet that didn't make it easier. If anything, it left her more tangled. Emma blinked back the sting in her eyes. She wanted to tell him she understood, that she cared, that she wasn't as unaffected as she looked. But the words felt too big, too risky, too final. The driver coughed softly, clearly uncomfortable with the silence. Waiting for her to step out, Emma pushed the door open, the cold rain immediately kissing her cheeks. She stepped onto the wet pavement, her heels tapping against the concrete. She held the door for a second longer than necessary, looking back at Daniel. His eyes met hers, steady, waiting. For a split second, it felt like the world had narrowed down to this moment. The glow of the streetlight, the silence, between two people who had just crossed a line they could never erase. Emma whispered, her voice trembling, "Good night, Daniel." It wasn't enough. It wasn't the truth her heart wanted to say. But it was all she could manage. She closed the door gently. The taxi pulled away, its red taillights glowing through the rain before disappearing into the distance. Daniel was gone, but his presence lingered like an echo in her chest. Emma stood there under the awning, rain dripping from its edge, her coat damp at the shoulders. Her heart still raced, her mind still spun. She pressed her hand against her chest as if to steady the storm inside. She thought back to his whisper every day. Every late night, "It hasn't been just about the job for me." Those words had changed everything. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't return to the way things were before that taxi ride. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, fumbling with her keys. Inside, the room felt too quiet, too still. She kicked off her shoes and sank onto the couch, staring at nothing. Her thoughts replayed the night over and over, the rain, the silence, the vulnerability in his eyes. Emma pulled a blanket around her shoulders. But it wasn't the cold that unsettled her. It was the truth she could no longer hide from herself. She cared about him too. She always had. Her phone buzzed on the table. For a moment, she froze, her heart leaping. Was it him? She picked it up quickly, but it was just a reminder about tomorrow's meeting. Relief and disappointment twisted together inside her. She placed the phone down and leaned back, closing her eyes. The office tomorrow would feel different. Every glance, every word, every silence would carry the weight of tonight. Could she handle it? Would they both pretend nothing happened? Or would the truth keep pushing through, demanding to be acknowledged? Emma sighed deeply. She didn't have answers yet. All she had was the memory of his whisper and the way it made her feel alive, terrified and hopeful all at once. Outside her window, the rain continued to fall. The city kept moving, unaware of the storm inside one woman's heart. Emma wrapped the blanket tighter and whispered into the quiet as if speaking to herself. Nothing will ever be the same. And deep down, she knew it was true.